Hello and welcome to the Tank Club. This is our veteran Maw of Lorkhaj tank guide for beginners. In this guide you'll see a realistic attempt at this trial. The group completing this is the Trial Academy group with almost a full group of players who have never completed this trial before. This is a 2-tank trial. 2 tanks will split the ad pools to make them more manageable, and on bosses the majority of the tanking is done by a main tank with an off tank needed intermittently in specific moments to tank one of the 2 second bosses. This is quite an old trial, and this is noticeable by the low max HP and the low damage output of the enemies in this trial. Maw of Lorkhaj, however, is a very mechanical trial, and it's still one of the more tricky trials to learn for beginners, as it's a big jump up from the Crag Launch trials. So let's get started. So as we get started in this trial, the main group focus is to kill the Sun Eaters. As we go in, we chain all the small ads into the location where the first Sun Eater will spawn. Once the Sun Eater spawns, this is where the off tank and the main tank need to work together. So you're going to have a Shadow Guard and you're going to have a Dreadstalker. The Dreadstalker spawns at the far side of the room. That needs to be taunted and then quickly pulled across. So you have to move very quickly, stand next to the statue. This stacks it on top of the Sun Eater. The other tank taunts the Shadow Guard and the Sun Eater, and everything gets stacked together and killed. One thing to note with Maw of Lorkhaj, during the making of this video, the Shadow Guards are bugged, so when you taunt them, sometimes they will run off even when they are fully taunted. As you move through to the second room, the off tank goes to the Sun Eater that is in the archway. The group go there and kill the Sun Eater as well, while the other tank waits for the small ads to run down the hill, and then you will taunt the Shadow Guard and the 2 Dreadstalkers. In this situation, everything is kind of stacked up already, but to make it safer, I'm going to be pulling everything away, and the Shadow Guard does run off, obviously like I said, because of the bug, but if you want to pull them away from the next ad stack, you can. For really elite strategies, you can pull both ad pulls together, so you wait till the Sun Eater's killed, then you can actually stack both of these 2 ad pulls together, but to play it safe, we're bringing everything and just stacking it like this. As we move into the third ad pull, we have another Sun Eater to the far left hand side. As the main tank, you would taunt the Shadow Guard and the 2 Dreadstalkers, and then you're going to run up the stairs. The off tank will take the Savage and pull it away. It's much safer for a beginner group to pull the Savages away. When you are more experienced, then you can keep those in the group and roll dodge all of the attacks that put a debuff, but the Sun Eaters need to be focused by the group. It's easier to always taunt left to right, so you taunt the first ad, the second one, then the third one, and then just run up the stairs. This will pull everything into a line of sight stack, because obviously these ads can't be chained in. The Shadow Guard is going to keep running off, because as we've mentioned already with the bug, the unfortunate situation here is the Sun Eater was aggroed by me, even though I didn't taunt it, so it came into the stack. The off tank here has to roll dodge not the heavy attacks. You can block the heavy attacks from the Savage. The overhead swing, which debuffs and shatters the target. So that's going to reduce the armor. The reason you pull this out of group is because if the dodge roll gets missed, that will debuff everybody in the surrounding area. The main thing that usually kills people with the Savage is the additional mechanics. So it's not necessarily the debuff, but when somebody's debuffed and then receives other damage from other mechanics, that's when deaths start to occur from that. As we move on to boss 1, the main thing here, we've got the main mechanics, the curse and the cleanse mechanic, the shield phase, the ads that have to be chained in, and then the hide mechanic. The way this fight is done is the main tank usually tanks the boss in the very center of the room, with the pads on the far left and right at the exit side saved for the tank. It's not a good idea to save these pads for the tank, because a set amount of people are going to get cursed every time. If the tanks don't get cursed, then obviously these pads need to be used by the rest of the group, but it is good to kind of make the tanks use those as a priority. The armor shatter is quite noticeable when you've got a lot of ads, but it's not a thing you've got to really worry about. As you get cursed, the off tank will need to take the boss. You then have to move as fast as possible to the pad, cleanse the curse, and then come back. You then take the boss, And then you start to chain in any adds. So as we've got to the add phase, we have to pull those in, and they should be cleaved down by the group. If your group aren't very good at cleaving them down, then they can also focus them. We now hit the shield phase. Everybody needs to be kind of spread out for the shield phase and put their ultimates on the boss during that section. The reason why the curse is such a problem is if too many people are stood close together and too many people get cursed at the same time, this means that there's not enough pads available. In this situation, we've got the tank pad there that's getting refreshed, and so we're able to get there quickly. You have to move as fast as possible to get the cleanse. We get another add phase. These need to be chained in. It's a good idea to maybe have pulsar, to have a snare, to have an immobilization, so that these adds get stuck on the boss, because they will start to shred your group. When the boss curls up, this is time to hide, and it's usually when there's 5 pillars at the very start. The longer the fight goes on though, less pillars will be available to hide behind. After that phase, you bring it back to the center. Here we've got curse, and we need to chain in adds. There is a slight delay because the off tank isn't ready. We make a quick movement across the room to get it, and then we have to start chaining before we take the boss back. The communication is absolutely key here between the main tank and the off tank. It's the most key thing that you need to be doing. You need to be calling out tank cursed every time. This is so the off tank knows to take the boss, and also so your group know to leave the pads alone so that you can cleanse, because if the tanks die, then the boss is going to start causing absolute chaos. Sometimes the pads won't be available, as you saw in that situation there. I was able to go and stand on the pad and wait a few seconds because I know that I was the one who took the pad the last time, and it's going to be ready to take again. You start to get a lot of deaths in this fight quite quickly as soon as people start to overlap and stand too close to each other, which means the curses start to overlap. When the adds start running loose and attacking people, they really hurt as well. So the two most integral things are to get these adds chained in quickly, people kill them, and obviously people need to stay in position. It's going to be time to hide again soon because you can see the pillars around the room. If a pillar is dropping on you, so there'll be a massive AoE, and there'll be a pillar that's dropping from the sky. When that happens, you can just block, and that will make it not knock you back, so people are getting knocked back by it. One of the big issues with the adds is if they're not killed quick enough, they become crowd control immune. Almost my whole group is dead here, so I had to take the boss with me to make sure that I could keep this fight going. I return it back to the center and try to get the adds pulled in. Obviously, it's very difficult to keep the adds pulled in because they will not be taunted. It's impossible to taunt the adds because they are taunt immune. They will just focus onto a target and then they will go after that person until they die. So we can do only crowd control, chaining, talons, snares. Finally, everybody's almost alive here, so the off tank takes the boss. We go and cleanse again. We're very unlucky in this fight because it is prolonged due to the fact that people have died. And it comes to the hide phase. Your group can keep up damage during the hide phase. As you can see, I'm just spamming chains because it's some kind of ranged ability that I've got. Return the boss back to the center. And the pillar there drops straight on top of me, but I blocked it, so it didn't do anything. And then that is the end of boss 1. The next ad pull can be kind of skipped. Most groups will skip this, especially if it's a beginner group. There's actually no reason to kill it, so you can skip past it. And then you're going to start to see new ads now. We've got shamans and renders. The renders need to be, they can either be pulled out of group by the off tank. The focus should be on the shamans, and the more enemies that are nearby the group, the more damage you're going to get because of the shaman. So the shaman will put an AoE around every single ad, an enemy that is in the area. So the main tank usually takes the shaman and the small ads. They need to try and kill them quickly. And then the render is, it can be pulled out of group. Now the way that you deal with the render is it has to be interrupted. When it starts to glow red, it becomes enraged, and then you have to keep bashing it. So you do a thing where you count it 1, 2, bash. 1, 2, bash, and that is how you keep it interrupted. On the next ad pull, there is going to be a Shadow Guard, a Sun Eater, and a Dreadstalker. So the off tank can pull out the Savage, the group needs to focus on the Sun Eater, and then the main tank, you take the Shadow Guard, run across the room, and then the Dreadstalker's there. So you just hold these out of group. Obviously, as we've mentioned already, the Shadow Guards, with the taunt bug, it just runs off. So you just have to keep spamming your taunt as best as you can to try and keep it aggroed. Your group always leave the Savage till last, even though it's the most dangerous ad in the ad pool in theory. The Dreadstalker is the ad that spawns all the little cats that chase after people and kill people, so that is the second priority after the Sun Eater. Everybody should be focusing Dreadstalker, Shadow Guard, and then finally Savage that's held out a group. We now get onto the big ad phase. Now the easiest way to do this is one tank goes to the cave, the other tank goes to the door on the far side of the room. There is going to be a render on the far side of the room, and the off tank can actually leave that to do its shout. Everybody here focuses the Shaman, and that just gets burnt down really quickly with all these little ads as well. When the Shaman puts its hands in the air and starts doing a big AoE everywhere, that's what causes the damage, and the more enemies that are in the area, the worse that it is. Now the place that you should stack this render is at the bottom of the hill just here. The reason for that is this where all the next ads are going to spawn, so the Sun Eater is going to spawn here. So we want to get everything ready so that all the AoE damage is on the ground already, so that your group can just burn everything down. On this next ad pull, there is going to be a Savage that spawns at the brazier at the back of the room. As the main tank, you take the Dreadstalker really quickly and then run up the hill. While you're running up the hill, there is a Shadow Guard that you can taunt. The reason why you do this is to pull the Dreadstalker onto the Sun Eater, but you've got to go really quickly. If you don't move fast enough, it won't stack up. As you can see here, it moved a little bit, but not enough. We keep the Savage a little bit away from the group so that we don't get a huge debuff, because the Shadow Guard does a spin attack which causes quite a lot of problems. Once this ad pull ends, we're going over to the door, and that's because we're going to get loads of ads from the door. The off tank goes to the cave. During this next ad pull, we have 2 renders. The group needs to focus the Shaman. One tank takes the render from the door, the other tank takes the render from the cave. They should bring them both together into a stack. The off tank here did hold the other render away just as a safety precaution, and we have to do the interrupt. 1, 2, bash. 1, 2, bash. 1, 2, bash. That's how you kind of time it. You don't want to spam your bash because you'll run out of stamina too quickly. We want to bring the render back over here so that we can be ready for the next ad pull. There's going to be a Sun Eater on the next ad pull. The off tank has to go back to the cave to take the Savage. There's another render here and another Shaman and a Sun Eater. So we try and stack all 3 things together. It's a good idea to try and tab target the render to make sure you keep the interrupts. And again, you do the same thing. 1, 2, bash. As you can see here, I missed it because it was stacked inside the Sun Eater. I missed the bash and it did knock everyone back. Sometimes that can be very deadly and kill a lot of people in your group. Next, I run over and I taunt the Archer, the Dreadstalker. I run up the hill and hide behind this wall a little bit to pull it into position ready for the next ad pull. On the next ad pull, we're going to have 2 Sun Eaters, we're going to have 2 Shadow Guards, and we're going to have the off tank take the 2 Shadow Guards that spawn on the opposite hill. I take the Dreadstalker and the 2 Sun Eaters, and then I run up the hill to bring them into one stack. The off tank is taking the 2 Shadow Guards and kind of holding them away because they do sometimes do a double spin attack. As you can see, the Shadow Guard's attacking me here because of the taunt bug. Once the Sun Eaters die, we can start bringing the Shadow Guards over and stacking them on the Archer and bringing things a bit closer together. And then that is the end of this ad pull. The exit hill that we're walking towards now is where the 2 Shadow Guards spawned from on that last ad pull. That's where you've got to be looking. And then we're on to boss number 2, the Twins. Now for this fight, we need to split the group into equal groups. We need 2 groups of 6, 1 tank on each side, 1 healer on each side, and then damage dealers to fill up the group. The reason we have to do this is because everybody in the group is assigned a head colour, either light or dark, depending on which boss you are closest to. A maximum of 6 people can have each head colour. And if you get too close to people with the opposite head colour, you will blow each other up. You can only do full damage to the boss of which you've got the opposite head colour. So the dark boss needs to be in front of the white group, and the white boss needs to be in front of the dark group so that they can output the maximum amount of damage. There's a multiple different ways you can do this fight. I like to do it so that the tank keeps the same boss every time, so you're going to see how to do that this way. To make sure this happens, I'm standing on the exit side, the other tank is on the entrance, and I'm taunting the white-headed boss at the very start, Skinrai. When the bosses curl up and stop attacking, it's time to switch over, so the tanks have to switch bosses. When this happens, 2 ads spawn, and I take Vashai over to the wall. Now this isn't the best way to do this fight, but it's definitely the easiest for a beginner group. So we make sure that the adds are taunted. The other tank stands in the middle of the room with the other boss to make sure that they can grab their adds easier. The white adds are much easier to deal with because they are melee adds, so they will just need taunting and they will run over. The dark adds are much more difficult. They're ranged adds, so they will need to be chained and pulled into the group. When the boss drops the negate, you just dodge roll to the side and then stand and tank it on the side of the previous negate. And that's to keep them away from the room so that the group have got more space to run. When the boss curls up and does the thing into the air, this is the colour change, and this shouldn't affect tanks. As long as you've got taunt of a boss, you will not get the colour change. Make sure you block the heavy attacks, because if you don't, you will lose your position because you'll get knocked backwards and then you'll be knocked into the wall and you won't be able to see what you're doing. So you've really got to make sure you block those. The next big mechanic is going to be the stay or switch mechanic. Now the bosses disappear and teleport to the two doors. If it's the boss that you were just attacking, you stay where you are. If it's the opposite boss, you have to run. If you're doing the same strategy as we're doing here, where the tanks keep the same boss the entire fight, you need to make sure you taunt the boss that's yours, so I'm taunting the dark boss, and then both tanks need to switch sides by running across the middle of the room during the phase where they don't have a head colour. This will mean that you'll keep the same boss because you move to the other side, so you've got the light head colour and you'll be able to keep the dark boss and vice versa. So now I've got Vashai on the opposite side of the room because this is the boss that I'm keeping. The adds spawn in. The critical point now is you always wait until straight after they're on a gate to chain in the adds. You cannot chain in adds until the negate has been dropped. We get the colour change mechanic again. As you can see, I'm not pushed right against the wall, and the reason for that is because if you are pushed right against the wall, your camera goes into first person and you can't see anything. As soon as the negate happens, I roll dodge out of it and I try and stack them up next to each other. And then we go to the same phase again where the bosses are going to teleport to the door. I always start running already because we can only move around the room clockwise. As you can see here, it's a swap because that is not the boss that we were killing. This is my boss. I taunt my boss. Once my head colour disappears, me and the other tank switch sides. I do not taunt the boss on the other side though. I'm just waiting for my boss to come back over. Once my boss comes running over, I stand so it's pointing it towards the wall. The reason why we point it towards the wall is if it's looking at somebody with the opposite head colour, so the blue boss is looking at somebody with a white head, it will drop a negate. The critical point with the white boss is people need to interrupt the adds and the boss. Once one boss dies, you get a few seconds where everybody in the room can kill it. If it doesn't get killed, it will teleport to the middle and you have a very short time where you can actually do this boss. So the adds need to be interrupted, the boss needs to be interrupted. Once you've done this boss, we go on to the next big add area. If you've got this blue beam through your character, it means the cats are targeting you, the glowing red one. The easiest way to do this is you can dodge roll. 1, 2, roll dodge. 1, 2, roll dodge. If you do that, it makes them much easier to kill, because obviously the boss is standing still and they can be killed much quicker. If you actually run around the room, it does make it much slower, but it is safer, so you can just sprint around the room to avoid these. It's probably one of the hardest bits. People don't understand you actually need to be running. You can't face them or roll dodge, you just have to run. And as you can see here, it takes a lot of victims. With the next adds, it's always easier to start with the left-hand side. That's because this is generally the harder add pull. On the first bit, you taunt the two Dreadstalkers. If you taunt the Dreadstalker and hide in this little crevice, they should kind of stack up, and then you can taunt the others from range. The off tank takes the Savage out of group, and the group needs to focus the Sun Eater. As the main tank, when you're taking these adds, you want to stand kind of away out of group. The group should be down at the bottom of the hill. You can stand on this top area where there's a bit of space. So you're holding the adds together, but so they're not in the group. You don't want to be stacked on top of your group. You want to be pulling them a little bit away, and that prevents them taking as much damage. On the next add pull, we get even more adds. We get 2 Shadow Guards and 2 Sun Eaters. Take them and stand on the little hill at the back so that you stood behind them, and then your group can focus down the Sun Eaters and cleave the Shadow Guards. The off tank pulls the Savage out of group. The next add pull becomes a little bit more difficult because there's some adds that spawn delayed. So everything gets killed here. This, like I say, the Savage is pulled out of group so that the group don't get debuffed. And then here we go. The next one is delayed adds. So you have to taunt everything as the main tank at this part, and then pull it out behind the Sun Eaters, and then the off tank has to be really quick to pull the Savage out when it spawns because it is on that delay. The group focus the 2 Sun Eaters and cleave down the Shadow Guards once again. Try and get out of any of the blue AoEs on the floor. That is actually a negate, and you won't be able to do any Magicka based spells while you stood inside that, so you need to try and get out of it as quickly as you can. You finish off the Savage, and then you're onto the right hand side, so somebody pulls the right hand lever. This one has a Savage at the start on the left hand side. Main tank takes the Dreadstalker and the Shadow Guard, stack it on top of the Sun Eater if you can. On the second ad pull, there is no Savage, so you can kind of split the next ad pull between the main tank and the off tank, but there isn't actually any Savages for the next ad pull. There is quite a lot of ads on ad pull 2 here, where you get multiple Dreadstalkers, Shadow Guards, and the Sun Eater, so the group focus the Sun Eater. You just try and stack everything together. Sometimes it's easier to leave the Dreadstalkers where they are because it takes longer to actually try and stack them in than just leave them where they are, but you can pull them back a little bit, so you could get the off tank to taunt the one on the right side and then run backwards to kind of stack it on top. Third ad pull, you've got a Savage and delayed Sun Eater, so the off tank takes the Savage out of group, and then you stack everything else up. Quite a lot of ads again on this one. The Sun Eater spawns right in the middle of the group, so it does make it that little bit easier for the group to focus it, and then they can just cleave everything down with AoE damage. Once this stack of ads dies, kill the Savage, and then it's onto the Corridor ad pull, which is another one that's really, really tricky with lots of ads spawning all over the place. So to start with, it's easier if the group go to the right side. There is a Savage on the right side, and then the 2 left-sided ads. You run into this corner, and that will pull them into position ready for the next Sun Eater. So the group are all on the right side with the Sun Eater. There's a Savage over there as well. You stand in this corner and it stacks the Dreadstalker in position ready for the second Sun Eater. So the next spawn of ads, this is where it's going to be. Once these are nearly dead, the off tank can bring the Savage over and take your position. As you can see, the Shadow Guard's running off due to the bug. Bring it into position. And then the next ad pull, you're going to need to split this into 2. So there's 2 Savages on the next ad pull. Now an experienced off tank might be able to take both. If you're in a beginner group like this one, then you'll want to split them. So I take 1 Savage, and I also taunt the Dreadstalker. I then just run away from the Savage, and then the group are focusing the Sun Eater that was on that left side. As you can see, I'm having to dodge roll the swing from the Savage. Every time it does the underarm swing, that's the heavy attack, and I'm just blocking that. The overhead swing, I'm dodge rolling. So as you can see, I've stacked up the Dreadstalker on top of the Sun Eater, and that's to give my group an easier time killing it. I keep my Savage in group because I'm able to roll dodge, and I know that I'm not going to get debuffed. And then I'm getting ready for the final ad pull in this room. It's a very, very busy ad pull. The off tank has to take the Savage that spawns in the very centre, but you have to be careful because there's also a Shadow Guard. I also taunt the Sun Eater, and then there's a Dreadstalker at either end of the room. So there's a Dreadstalker at the entrance, Dreadstalker at the exit, a Shadow Guard in the middle, and then I also take the Sun Eater that spawned on the left side because my group are stood on the right. I then run back to this corner to stack everything up. I just so happen to have aggro of the right-sided Sun Eater as well, so now we've got a whole stack of everything pulled together. This will make it a bit quicker, but obviously the group needs to really focus hard on the Sun Eater because it's all now stacked up. I'm taunting everything that I can, and the off tank is holding out the Savage because that is the one that's going to start causing a lot of problems. Any sort of damage that happens here is probably going to kill people. The longer the Dreadstalkers stay alive, the more cats there are running around the room focusing people. So that's why the Dreadstalkers need to be killed really, really quickly after the Sun Eaters. Once everything dies here, the savage should be killed, and then it's on to the last boss. So on the last boss, there's a few different mechanics that you've got to watch out for. The first mechanic is the pads, and there are 8 pads around this room. When they turn gold, the main tank needs to be stood on them, and nobody else should be stood on them. When they're blue, you want to be nowhere near them, because you will get a debuff applied to your character. When you're stood on the gold pads, they give you a buff called the Lunar Bastion, and this will reduce the damage that Rakkhat is doing to your character. If you don't have this buff, he can one-shot you with some basic attacks. The other main mechanics are the barrage, also known as a machine gun, where the boss holds its hands in front of itself and then shoots you with a quick, rapid succession attack, and that will do some real damage. This has to be pointed away from your group, and you can mitigate some of the damage from this by using Protective Plate, by using Shimmer and Shield or Absorb Missile. Those kind of skills are going to reduce the damage you take from barrage. You don't have to be standing in the gold pad when you've got barrage. This is really important. Many people don't know this. So you do not want to be facing your group. If for some reason the boss is awkwardly positioned and you need to step off the pad to make sure people don't die from the machine gun, then you can do. It's every other mechanic where you need to be stood on it. The other mechanic is the pad change. So when the boss flies up in the air and goes to the middle of the pad, you then have to switch to the next pad. And you have to be very careful, because sometimes if somebody steps on it, or sometimes it bugs out, the boss will land on top of you, and then you will be killed because you didn't get the Lunar Bastion buff. So one of the safer ways to do this is to stand on the edge of the pad, and then as the boss flies over, you roll dodge onto the pad. That stops you getting killed by the attack when it flies over, but it also means that you position the boss perfectly every time. The next mechanic is Threshing Wing. The boss will fly in the air twice. One time it will fly in the air and you'll be pinned to the floor. The second time it flies into the air, it will knock everybody back. So you do have to make sure that you either block when it does that, or you can roll dodge, because sometimes there will be overlapping mechanics, such as the kite mechanic and the Threshing Wing at the same time. If that happens, you just have to dodge roll, but make sure you return yourself back to the gold pad very, very quickly. The kite mechanic that happens, you will need 3 people in your group to be kiting. One's usually a healer, and then there's usually 2 damage dealers, and they are behind the group running away from the group. The kite mechanic always happens on the main tank. When this happens, you just run around in a circle around the pad, and you can do this without blocking, because the attacks from Rakkhat won't kill you during this. He doesn't do enough damage to really kill you. As long as you've got a heal on your character, it shouldn't be much of an issue. The final mechanic is the adds. In this fight, we are going to get hulks that spawn in on pads 2, 4 and 6. The off tank has to taunt these and bring them over to the pad in front of Rakkhat so that they can be cleaved down. The responsibility is solely of the off tank to get the interrupts, so they should keep the hulks tab targeted at all times and make sure they get the interrupts, even if they don't have the hulk taunted. The way that this works is the hulk will be brought in. The off tank will take 2 thunderous smash hits, which is that overhead slam, and then the main tank has to take taunt of the hulk. The easiest time to do this is during a pad switch, because that's generally when it'll be time for the main tank to take them anyway. The main tank takes the hulk, puts it into position. The off tank has to make sure they're tracking the hulk at all times. They always follow it 100% of the time and make sure they get the interrupts. Once the main tank receives 1 hit, the off tank can take it back and keep it in position. The reason why you have to do this is because there's a bad bit of collision between Rakkhat and the hulks, so it's easier for the main tank to position the hulk just out away from the pad, curve it around, circle around the pad so that it's behind the main tank, because the off tank's tracking it anyway. That means that when Rakkhat jumps over, it lands in front, and then the off tank takes it as soon as the hit happens, and you can just spin the boss around, and then there's no collision. We're going to now look at this fight in detail, and I'm going to show you those mechanics in action and explain what I'm doing as we're going. So here we go. So we buff up before we start this fight, and then we need to be the first ones to go in. So ideally you want to run in and taunt the boss to keep it in position. If you range taunt it, it's going to move, whereas you want to try and keep it as still as you can for this first bit so you can get as much damage on it right at the start. You don't want to stand in the middle circle, because when the boss slams in the air, it will turn blue, and if you get hit by that, you'll be debuffed. You then want to stand in your gold pad. Wherever you stand, the boss is always going to land in front of you. So you want to stand at the back edge of the pad to make sure it's right in the center, right in front of your group, and then you kind of just hit it with all your skills until it holds its hands in the air. This is the barrage, and you want to be using your protective plate here to kind of mitigate the damage. After this, it's a very good chance that the boss is going to be on the pad switch, so we need to be ready to move. The off tank needs to be in position ready to taunt the Hulk. So the boss jumps into the air. Now we know it's time to move, so we make sure we've got a taunt. We run and we stand at the back edge of the pad, and the off tank brings in the Hulk. They need to be making sure they get the interrupts, and once we get the next pad switch, we're going to need to make sure we're going to move with the Hulk. The boss will turn around. When it does that, it's an interruptible. The threshing wing is something we need to block, and our group will need to block it as well. So when the boss jumps in the air, it's either going to pin you or going to need blocking. We then get the kite mechanic. The off tank is on 2 hits from the Hulk. During the kite mechanic, we have to run around the pad, and then we taunt the Hulk and we start running. As you can see, I'm running past pad 2, and that's to make sure the Hulk goes behind me. I then stand in front of the gold pad here so that Rakkhat will come and land on top, and then I will roll dodge through it. The reason for this is to make sure Rakkhat is positioned perfectly in front of the group, and then the off tank will now taunt the Hulk. The boss turned away, so that was the interruptible, so we got the interrupt there, and then we're kind of bringing it into position. We've now got the whole pad to work with because we dodge rolled through to allow the boss to land just in front, and now the boss is perfectly in the group. The light and heavy attacks don't really do very much here. As you can see, we got pinned to the ground, so that wasn't a threshing wing. The next one would be, so every other time the boss flies in the air, it's going to be a threshing wing or it's going to be a pin. This is the barrage again, so making sure we've got our mitigation with our wings there, and that just mitigates the damage while the healer puts all the healing on top of us. Quite easy to deal with. This is the threshing wing now, so we just block this. If this happens during a kite phase, we just have to roll dodge, because that will also prevent you from getting knocked back by it. We then get the kite mechanic. You just run around the edge of the gold pad. Don't get hit by these AoEs. If you get hit by them, you get a healing debuff, which can cause you to die as the main tank especially. When we move on to the next pad, it's going to be another Hulk that spawns, so the off tank has to start getting ready. We get pinned to the ground, so this isn't the threshing wing. We don't have to do anything. You don't have to break free there. You just hold block, and you will come out of the pin just in time to block the attack from Rakkhat. The boss flies into the center of the pad, so it's time to move. The off tank is getting ready for the Hulk again, and we just get ready to position the boss on the edge of the next pad. We've got to get ready to take the Hulk again on this phase. When Rakkhat flies over, it also pins you to the ground, but you will again break free automatically before he lands, so you don't have to break free. Threshing wing happens and we block it. The pad switch is going to happen very, very soon. And then we're going to have to taunt the Hulk and take it with us. So here we go. The boss goes to the center of the pad. We taunt the Hulk. The off tank has to get the interrupt. And we kite around the pad. We circle around. And it looks as if the Hulk lost aggro there. And then we roll dodge onto the pad to make the main boss right at the front. It turns around, so we need to interrupt it. And then it's time to kite. We kite everything around the edge of the pad, making sure we don't get hit. The boss does step forward a little bit there, which is fine. We've still got plenty of room to work with. And then we're going to be going into the execute phase. The boss jumps in the air. That's a pin, so it's not the knockback. We just wait for it to pull us out of the pin phase. And then the boss goes to the middle. You don't go to the middle till the blue has gone. During this phase, you can see there's these tethers that link to the boss. The main tank should take one, because you just run in, you pick up the little orb, and that means the boss is going to take more damage. The more orbs and tethers that are linked to the boss, the less damage he'll take, because he'll get resistance. So it's good for the tanks and the healers to take those, and this is why as well you don't want to get hit by the blue pad. A Hulk will spawn in pad 5 after a couple of seconds, so the off tank should take that. If the off tank is dead, then obviously the main tank should take it. And that is the last boss fight. I hope you found this guide useful. Make sure you check out thetankclub.com for all your ESO tank content. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.